It all started on a sunny Saturday, one of those Saturdays that seem designed for forgetting your problems and just enjoying yourself. My son and I went to the condominium swimming pool, one of the few places we can still enjoy without having to deal with clueless people. Or so I thought. My son, for those who don't know, has been wheelchair-bound since he was 5. It's never been a problem for us because he's always been active, cheerful, and full of life. But for some people, the idea of a happy boy in a wheelchair seems to be a personal challenge. And that's how this woman, this janitor from hell, came into our lives with the subtlety of a runaway truck. She appeared as if she wanted nothing, pretending to be there just to inspect the pool area, since she was part of the leadership of the Residents Association. But her gaze never left my son's, as if she were trying to solve a complicated equation. I wonder what was going through her head. It certainly wasn't something clever. I ignored it because, frankly, I don't have time to debate with people who think they can monitor other people's lives. But then, out of the blue, she lets it out. Oh, how cute. But can he really stay here? There's no risk of him being dangerous? That's it. That was the first red flag. When someone starts a sentence with, "How cute," you can expect a bombshell. I politely explained that my son always came with me to the pool, that it was a public space in the condominium, and that he loved it there. But the woman wasn't satisfied. She looked at me with the face of someone who thinks she knows everything and fired. But does he really need that chair? I mean, he's here. He can move with his arms. He can swim, right? I swear, for a second I thought I hadn't heard correctly. Who in their right mind asks a question like that? I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But then I looked into her eyes. She wasn't joking. At that moment, I realized that she wasn't just nosy. She was dangerous. While I was trying to decide whether to spend my time educating the creature or simply ignore it, she stepped forward and, before I could react, grabbed my son's wheelchair and pushed him straight into the pool. It was a second that seemed like an eternity. The sound of the water swallowing my son hit me harder than any scream. I saw his expression change from joy to absolute panic, his arms flailing in the water, trying to stay afloat. He could swim, yes, but not in the way this woman thought. He always entered the water calmly, at his own pace, with help, never in that sudden, brutal way. My heart raced. My legs moved before my mind could even process it. I ran and jumped into the pool without a second thought. The woman stood on the edge, arms crossed, as if she had just proved a point. Yes, she was looking at the scene as if she expected my son to magically start swimming like an Olympic athlete and say, "Wow, thank you so much. You've cured me. I'll never need my chair again." But what happened was obvious. My son was sinking, swallowing water, going into despair. Within seconds, I reached him and held him tight, bringing him to the surface. He was coughing, clinging to me, trying to catch his breath. And that woman? She was still standing there with her arms crossed, looking at me as if I was the wrong one. When I finally managed to bring my son to the edge and help him out of the water, my head was boiling. I was torn between giving an epic lecture or simply shouting until my voice was gone. But before I could say anything, she opened her mouth again, without a shred of guilt. "See? He didn't sink. Yes, he can swim. You're overprotective." And that's when I realized that I wasn't just dealing with a clueless person. I was dealing with someone who genuinely believed they had done something good. What do you do when you meet someone like that? Do you argue? Do you try to reason with them? Or do you simply call the police before they come up with another brilliant idea? Because, believe me, this story was far from over. I've never been a violent person, but at that moment, I felt something rising in my chest, a mixture of hatred and disbelief that made my skin tingle. How could someone be so clueless, so cruel? My son was still coughing, shaking with fright, clinging to me as if at any moment that crazy woman might appear again and throw him into the water. And do you know what that woman did? She crossed her arms and stared at us with a look of victory. Yes, victory. She really believed that she had proved a point, that she had done something heroic. You're exaggerating. He's fine. This is all drama. That's what she had the audacity to say. Drama. She threw a wheelchair-bound child into the pool. He nearly drowned, and here I am exaggerating. The only thing stopping me from pushing her into the water was the fact that I didn't want to dirty the pool with such rotten people. I picked up my son in my arms and carried him to the wheelchair, which was miraculously still on the edge. He was panting, wet, scared, trying to understand what had just happened, and she was standing there, looking at me as if she was expecting a thank you. "You've completely lost your mind." My voice came out shaky, but not from fear. Hate. She shrugged. Shoulders. "Oh, please. If he can stay in the pool, he can swim. You think you're helping him by putting him in that chair, but you're limiting his life." At that moment, I felt like my head was going to explode. I swear, if stupidity were a crime, she'd get life. So, for this woman, the problem wasn't that she threw a helpless child into the water without warning, without permission, without any consideration. The problem was that I, the mother, wasn't letting him get over himself, get over it, by pushing him. It was unbelievable. The people around were already starting to realize that something was wrong. Some people were watching, whispering, but nobody had the courage to intervene yet. You know that moment when everyone wants to see the circus on fire, but no one wants to be the spark. That's right. The woman noticed the stairs and suddenly changed tactics. Her face turned a little red, and she tried to soften her tone. "Look, I just wanted to help." Ah, now she wanted to help. Help? You threw my son in the water like a sack of garbage and you mean to help? What happened then? She rolled her eyes. Yes, she rolled her eyes, as if I were one of those exaggerated mothers on social media who scream because their child has fallen and hurt their knee. Oh my God, what an exaggeration. I grew up in a time when children played in the street, got hurt, and nobody made a fuss. Nowadays, everything is a scandal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she really comparing a criminal push with a child playing in the street? At that moment, my son, still pale and trembling, looked at her with an expression I had never seen before. I saw anger. My son wasn't the type to hold a grudge. He had always been a sweet child, always tried to see the best in people, but at that moment, I realized that he understood something I wanted him not to. There are people in the world who are simply no good. And do you know what hurt the most? The way he looked at me afterwards, as if to say, "Mom, what did I do to deserve this?" My heart broke. The woman realized that I was about to fly into her neck and finally started to walk away. "You know what? I just wanted to help, but I've seen that you can't accept reality. You're still there, raising a weak, spoiled child. Don't complain later." And she walked off, just like that, as if he hadn't done anything wrong. I stood there, feeling a heat rising to my face. My hands were shaking. My teeth were clenched with rage. I could only think of one thing. If this woman thinks this story is over, she has no idea who she's dealing with, because this was just beginning. Do you know when something happens and you're left thinking about all the answers you should have given? But in my case, it wasn't just about answering. It was about making this woman pay for what she did. The problem with people like her is that they do what they want and then walk away as if they were the masters of the world, as if the rules didn't apply to them, as if they could throw a wheelchair-bound child into the pool and get away with it, because deep down they believe they are good people. Except she wasn't dealing with just anyone. She was dealing with me, and I wasn't going to let that go. After calming my son down and making sure he was okay, my first action was to call the police. Yes, I went straight for it, because if there's one thing this woman needs to learn, it's that there's a limit to intrusion, but there's no limit to crime. The policeman who showed up looked like the typical guy tired of dealing with stupid people. He listened to my story, and at first, I thought he was going to treat it as a neighbor's quarrel. But when I explained in detail that the woman had taken my son's wheelchair and thrown it into the pool against his will. His tone changed. "Did she deliberately put your son in danger?" he asked, already jotting it down in his notebook. "Yes, and she even had the audacity to say that I was exaggerating." My son was still shaken, but he confirmed everything. I wanted him not to have to relive it, but it was important that someone other than me told him what had happened. The policeman took a deep breath and said, "This isn't just a misunderstanding. This is assault and negligence, and you can file a complaint." Ah, but of course, I was going to record it. And you know what was even better? The officer told me that since she was part of the HOA, the Neighborhood Association, this could even result in a bigger lawsuit against her and the association for negligence. In other words, not only was I going to screw up her life, but I was also going to shake up the little organization she loved so much. Sweet revenge. The police went to the creature's house, and I went after her, because I wanted to see. When she opened the door, she had that "I didn't do anything wrong" look on her face, as if she was an innocent lady who just wanted to help. "Ma'am, we've received a report of child abuse and neglect. We need you to come with us for clarification." Her? She laughed. Yes, she laughed in the policeman's face. "That's ridiculous. I've done nothing but encourage a boy to better himself. This woman is over the top. The world is too sensitive." The policeman didn't laugh. "You pushed a wheelchair-bound child into a swimming pool without his consent and put his life at risk. That's a crime." She widened her eyes. Ah, now she was beginning to understand. And best of all, the neighbors were watching. Yes, because as soon as the car pulled up in front of her house, the curious started to appear, one by one, with cell phones, judgmental looks, and whispers. People who, before, thought she was just bossy, now saw what a monster she really was. She tried to argue. Of course she did. But then, the policeman dropped the bombshell. "You are officially being charged with child assault and reckless behavior. You have the right to remain silent." The shock on her face was wonderful. For a second, she froze. But then, despair set in. "What? You can't be serious. He's fine. It's just water. Children have to learn to swim. It's a life lesson. That's not for you to decide," the policeman replied dryly. And then came the best moment of all, the moment that will live in my memory forever. They handcuffed her, and I swear to all that is holy that I heard one of the neighbors let out a soft, "Yes!" because deep down, no one could stand this woman any longer. And to see her being taken away by the police, it was a gift. I looked right into her eyes as she was pushed into the car and smiled. A smile that said, "Don't mess with me." Oh, no. It was going to get worse for her. Because, while she was being taken away, I was already preparing the second part of my plan, to expose everything in the condominium group. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Videos, reports, the police report, every disgusting detail of what this woman had done. In less than an hour, the group was in flames. Neighbors who already disliked her began to speak out. People who had previously kept quiet for fear of reprisal were now venting stories that no one had ever told. She fined me because my car was too dirty. She made my son cry because she said his bike didn't fit in with the neighborhood. She tried to stop my wheelchair-bound brother from using the gym, saying that the equipment wasn't designed for disabled people. This woman wasn't just a monster. She was a problem that everyone had tolerated for far too long. And now, she was being crushed by her own poison. Over the next few days, her house became a graveyard. No one spoke to her. No one said hello. People turned away from her in the street. And then came the best news of all. She was expelled from the HOA. Yes, that same association that she ruled with an iron fist, that she used to torment everyone's life, decided that she was a legal risk and needed to leave. And, as icing on the cake, she received a lawsuit. Because I wasn't going to let it go. She had to pay for my son's emotional damage. She had to pay compensation. And shortly afterwards, she put the house up for sale. Defeated, humiliated, expelled. Because if there's one thing this story has proved, It's that bad people may even think they're in control. But sooner or later, they learn that the law of life is simple. Mess with the wrong person, then you'll pay the price. I'd like to say that after this woman was handcuffed and humiliated in front of the entire condominium, my life went back to normal. But unfortunately, bad people don't accept losing. You know that kind of person who, even after screwing up their own life, still tries to justify themselves? That's right. She returned from the police station the next day, after posting bail. But anyone who looked at her face could tell. She knew she had lost. Before, she paraded around the condominium as if she were the queen of the place, handing out rules as if she were the president of the United States. Now, she walked around looking at the ground, trying to avoid eye contact. But honestly, it was too late. The most hated woman in the neighborhood had finally tasted her own poison. First, she tried to play the victim. He began to spread the word that it was all a misunderstanding, that I had exaggerated, that I didn't know how to raise a child, and that, deep down, she just wanted to help teach him to be independent. But then came the question, what about the handcuffs? If what she did was so harmless, then why did the police take her away? Why did everyone see her coming out of the car looking like she'd been slapped by reality? She had no answer to that. So when she saw that no one was buying this story, she changed tactics. When she saw that she wasn't going to be able to play the poor thing, she decided to appeal to her natural side, being insufferable. She went after the HOA, demanding to be reinstalled. She tried to argue that it was all my fault, that I was a problem, that the condominium would be a mess without her. And, for the first time in history, the HOA did something right. It told her to go fuck herself. Literally. They refused any chance of her coming back. And on top of that, they put a measure in place so that she could never again sit on the board of any association in the neighborhood. Do you know what that means? She lost the only power she had. And without being able to control other people's lives, she became what? Nothing. Oh, and that's when she really started to fall apart. Because now, without the position in the HOA, without the respect, which she never had, but thought she had, and with a lawsuit against her, no one pretended to be polite anymore. Before, people tolerated her presence, but after what she did, no one made a point of hiding their contempt. No one said hello. No one looked her in the face. No one opened the door to listen to her complaints. If before she loved giving orders and handing out fines, now she couldn't even sit on her own balcony without receiving judgmental looks. And you know what was worse? Her own friends began to drift away, because, as much as some of them were also rule-loving pricks, nobody wanted to be associated with a criminal. And so, little by little, she was left alone. I was already satisfied. Honestly, after all this, I just wanted to get on with my life and forget that this woman ever existed. But then, one fine day, the icing on the cake happened. It was a quiet morning when I noticed a large moving truck stopped in front of her house. At first, I thought it was something silly, but then I saw her, the creature herself, with her arms crossed, watching the movers pack her things. She was leaving. Yes, she had lost so much that she had no choice but to move, and I made sure I enjoyed every second of it. I stood on my balcony, holding my coffee, watching. A few people stopped too, just to see for themselves that the nightmare was really over. And the best thing? Nobody said a word. No one offered a farewell smile. It was as if she had never existed. The only thing she received was absolute silence. And I swear on all that is holy that, the moment she got into the car and slammed the door, I could see the look on her face. It was anger mixed with failure. And then, finally, she left. After the creature disappeared from our lives, the whole condominium entered a state of peace that I didn't even know was possible. No ridiculous rules, no pointless fines, without a petty dictator telling everyone what to do. And most importantly, my son went back to the pool without fear. Of course, He still carried the trauma of what had happened, but knowing that that woman would never come near him again was a huge relief. The case against her continued, and in the end, she had to pay for the moral and emotional damage she had caused. In other words, she lost everything. And what about me? Well, I learned something very valuable. Never underestimate an asshole's ability to ruin his own life. And in the end, I didn't even have to get dirty. She dug her own hole, and I just stood there, watching as she fell into it. Goodbye, Karen, and may one like her never appear again. Don't forget to leave a like and comment on what you thought of Karen.